channel for another watercolor tutorial. Today we're going to be learning how to paint a super simple loose style watercolor flower. The technique I'm going to show you today is by far one of the easiest ways to create stunning loose florals without having to put in too much effort. Believe me when I say you can't really go wrong with this technique. So let's get started. First up, the supplies I'll be using are 100% cotton watercolor paper, the Odyssey paint palette from Art Philosophy, and my favorite brushes for loose florals, the Princeton Neptune size 4 and 8 round brushes. You'll also need a bowl of clean water, paper towel, and a palette or surface for mixing your paint. One more note before we get started, you do not have to use the exact same colors that I'm using in this video. Feel free to just use whatever colors that you have at home and that you like to work with. I'm going to start with my size 4 round brush, and I'm just going to really load it up with this vibrant yellowy orange color. Once I have enough on my brush, I'm just going to lightly tap in some pigment to create a very dainty center of the flower. Once I have the center painted, I'm going to use my size 8 Neptune brush. And I'm using a lot of water and really just loading up a lot of water and pigment on my brush. We're, again, painting in the very loose style. We're going to be using a lot of water and just creating really fluffy, big petals. Now with this dark, very vibrant pink color, I'm just going to tap in some more color gently around the yellow that I painted for the center. So I don't want these to bleed too much and the center is still wet, so just be sure to leave a little bit of white space and just gently tap in some of that color around it. Now comes the fun part, which is adding in the big fluffy petals. So I'm rinsing off the majority of that pigment from my brush, but still making sure that I have lots of water loaded up into the bristles. And what we're going to be doing is just using the tip of your brush to drag out some of this pigment and then lay down a lot of pressure onto the paper from your brush to create petals. And I usually do about 5 or 6 petals around the flower. So again, using the very tip, dragging up some of that pigment, and then just laying my brush down on the paper. So I didn't start out with any color on my brush, just a lot of water. So what we're doing is using the pigment that we dropped in beforehand and just pulling it out. And I'm just going to repeat that process around the center of the flower. Making sure, again, that I have lots of water in my bristles because we want to be able to create this without it drying out. So dragging out the pigment and just laying the brush down on the page. Keep in mind, this is, again, a very loose style flower, so don't worry too much about creating the perfect petal shape. Make sure each one is slightly different. Load up water. Drag out some of that color and just lay it down on the page. Once your petals are down on the page, I like to go back in with a lot of that very deep pigment. So load it up on your brush and just gently tap it in at the center. And since your petals are still wet, you can see that the color just bleeds and blooms into the petal. giving it a really nice floaty, soft effect. And that is about it for the flower. I told you this is kind of a foolproof method to create a beautiful loose bloom like this. So again, just dropping in a lot of pigment in the center of the flower and then drawing it out with a lot of water in your brush. So you can end there, or if you'd like to add some leaves, I like to do this while my petals are still wet, so it creates even more bloom. So I'm just loading up some really dark green, and my petals are still wet, so I'm just gonna gently tap it in. I used to be scared of bleeds and blooms like that, but now it's part of my style and I love the effect it gives on the flower. And I'm just adding in some very loose style leaves here. I'm wiggling my brush a bit to give it just a nice organic, natural look. And there you have it. That's your flower. I also want to mention, if you want to learn even more floral watercolor techniques and learn how to create beautiful compositions and bouquets, I encourage you to check out my online class called Loose Watercolor Florals: How to Paint Easy Flower Compositions and Bouquets. That class is suitable for beginner and intermediate watercolor artists, and it's available on Skillshare and on my website, petalsbypriya.com. I'll leave a link to both of those down below. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you had fun learning this new technique, and don't forget to follow me over on Instagram at petals_by_priya, where I share a lot more paintings, process videos, and behind the scenes content. See you next time.